So good day everyone. Today we are going to discuss the graphing applications of derivatives. That includes the application of the first derivative test, no, in determining the interval, whether it is increasing or decreasing. So another concept that we are going to discuss is the extreme value theorem and how does the first derivative test is applied in graphing, in curve sketching. So in our next lecture, we are going to discuss naman the second derivative test. So pag sinabi kong second derivative test, ay naman yung ginagamit para matrace natin yung ating curve, no? Yung inflection points, concave up, concave down. But now, we are going to start first with the extreme value theorem. So we have already discussed these applications of derivatives on the previous lectures. So today we are going to discuss the curve sketching. So on the curve sketching, we have what we call the extreme value theorem. So what is this theorem tells us? According to its definition, if we have a function, that moves from continuously, so meaning to say if the function is moving continuously, therefore if the function is moving continuously, what does it mean? Meaning to say, the function doesn't have a restriction on its domain. No? So meaning to say, the function moves from one end to another, no, without lifting up our ball pen or pencil. No? So there is no room for discontinuity on which the uh, movement of the function, no, will be altered. So basically, extreme value theorem tells us that if we have a continuous function, no, with it always have a maximum and minimum point, no. So basically, it just tells us that if we have a continuous function, kung meron tayong continuous function, therefore palaging yung continuous function na yun palaging may maximum and minimum point, no? So, and that maximum and minimum point is what we call the relative extrema and minima. So later, we are going to explain the other type of extrema, which is the global maxima and minima. Today, when we say relative extrema and relative minima, or relative maxima and relative minima, now if we have a relative from the word itself, relative, meaning to say it is the uh, relative minimum is the lowest relative to its neighborhood. So basically, in this company, the lowest point is this one. That's why this is relative. Now the question is, if this is the highest point, why is this a relative maximum? If this is the maximum here, why is this the relative maximum? So as you can see, if this is the the definition of relative maximum does not necessarily mean that you need to be the highest among all of the function, but you need the definition of relative maximum tells us that it is the highest among its group or neighborhood. So dun lang sa nakapalibot sa barangay nyo, hindi sa buong function. So that's what we call also the relative maximum is also called the local maximum. And the relative minimum is also called the local minimum. Okay? So, how about this highest mountain? Is this also a relative maximum? Actually, this is also a relative maximum. No? Because it is the highest among these group or even this whole function. And this one, deepest valley, is also a relative minimum. So, bakit siya relative minimum? Pag ang pinag-uusapan natin is itong point lang, ang pinakamaliit dyan is ito. Kaya siya yung relative minimum. However, when we say global maximum, So when we say global maximum, therefore we are going to have a maximum point among all of the function. Yun yung tinatawag nating global maximum. Or is it also called the absolute maxima? So, absolute, ibig sabihin, ang maxima, ibig sabihin siya yung pinakamataas sa buong function. That's why this point is an absolute maximum and also a relative maximum. And this point is also an absolute minimum and relative minimum. So, is this point a global minimum or absolute mean? This is not a global minimum because this is not the lowest among all of the functions. However, this point is the lowest among this neighborhood. That's why it is relative minimum. No? Siya yung pinakamaliit relative dun sa nakapalibot sa kanya. No, that it doesn't necessarily mean that it is the minimum among all of the whole function. Okay, continuing. Mathematically, we can define relative extremum if we have an interval, no, open interval such that the largest value is the xo, which is inside the interval. And relative minimum if there is an open interval in the function, and fx sub o is the lowest among the interval. So for example, just this one, just like I have explained earlier, so this point is the absolute minimum, no? So this point is a relative minimum kasi siya lang yung pinakamaliit sa nakapalibot sa kanya. Now, if this is a relative maximum, hindi naman ibig sabihin na siya yung pinakamalaki sa buong function. Pero, malaki siya. Okay? However, this point is a absolute and relative maximum because it is the highest point among all of the function. Relative maximum because this is the highest point among this neighborhood. Okay? Dito sa ating barangay na to, or in this city, this is the highest. So, so that's why it is relative because it is the highest or the minimum. It is the lowest or highest relative dun sa tinutukoy nating sakop. No? Okay? So, what we call the critical point. So, what is critical point? So, critical point is basically a point in the function in which we have a horizontal tangent line. No? So, pag sinabi nating horizontal tangent line, meaning to say, our derivative, no? Kapag, di ba, pag ang definition palagi ng derivative, it is as the slope of the function at a single point, di ba? No? At an instant. So, basically, yung slope na yan, na nag-touch at instant, no, is what we call the derivative. Now, sabi, kapag meron tayong horizontal tangent line, just like on this point, no? Pag meron tayong horizontal tangent line, meaning to say, our slope is 0. So, therefore, if our slope is equal to 0, therefore, we are going to have therefore, meron tayong, yung first derivative natin ay 0. So, yun yung sinasabi. So, basically, yun yung point sa x value such that, no, na yung value ng first derivative ay equal sa 0. And a critical point can also be found on the point of non-differentiability. So, later we are going to discuss that. So, when we say if we have a horizontal point, no, this is where we can find the local minimum and the local maximum. Okay? So, however, not all critical points however, not all critical points occur at the local extrema. So, basically, this just says, no, na hindi lahat naman ng, kung lahat ng local extrema at local minima is matatagpuan sa ating critical points, no, hindi ibig sabihin naman na lahat ng critical points ay matatagpuan sa local extrema at local minima. So, what does it mean? Because in this function, this is also a critical point. But the problem is, hindi naman ito yung local extrema natin eh. Hindi naman siya yung local minima, hindi siya yung local maxima. Pero critical point siya. 'Di ba? 'Di ba sabi ko, all critical points sa lahat ng critical points doon matatagpuan si local extremas. However, not all critical points can be found or find at the local extremas. Okay? So, for example, in this function, this is not the local extrema. Because if you move the function here, you cannot determine what is the lowest point kasi infinity yan and negative infinity. If you move the function here, you cannot determine what's the highest point because this is positive infinity. But this is a critical point. Okay? Now, if we need to identify the relative maximum and minimum in each graph, so for example, we have the graph of x squared. So basically, on the graph of x squared, as you can see, we have a, what do we have? Do we have a relative maximum in the graph of x squared? So take a look at the function of x squared or quadratic function. Basically, this function has no relative maxima because as you can see, this has an arrow, no, tuloy-tuloy yan pa left at tuloy-tuloy yan pa taas pa right. However, it has a lowest point, no, here. So this lowest point here is the what we call the, it has a relative minima, no? So it has a relative minima at x is equal to 0. So this point here. Okay? How about this function? This function has no relative extrema because you cannot determine what is the lowest here. You cannot determine what is the lowest here because this is a cubic function is continuing to the low and to the lowest and to the highest point. So hindi natin alam, no? Hindi natin alam yung highest point na magagawa nitong function na to at yung lowest point na magagawa ng function na to. Okay? Next, so this one, we have a, as you can see, meron tayong ganito, di ba? So this point, as you can see, this is a, what do you think at this point on the graph of x cubed? It has a relative minima and maxima at x is equal to -1. So basically, that x is equal to -1, it has a relative maxima in x is equal to -1. Okay, but it has a relative minima at x is equal to -1. But remember, our definition of relative minimum and maximum, hindi ibig sabihin na siya yung pinakamalaki at pinakamaliit sa function. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean na yun yung pinakamalaki at pinakamaliit sa buong function. It just means that ang ibig sabihin lang nun na ito, siya yung pinakamalaki relative dito sa isang neighborhood. Dito, siya yung pinakamaliit relative dito sa kanyang neighborhood. That's why it has a relative minima at x equal to -1. At x is equal to 1 and it has a relative maxima at x is equal to -1. So another function, for example, we have this function y is equal to 1/2 x raised to 4 minus 4x cubed minus x squared plus 4x plus 1. So this is a polynomial function, but you can see we have a relative minima here. Meron din tayong relative minima here. Okay? But we also have a relative maximum here. Okay? So next, this function cosine x. So as you can see, it has no absolute maxima and minima kasi lahat naman ito ay ganito, but it has a relative minimum at these points and relative maximum at these points. So, ganun yung paghahanap ng relative minimum and maximum on points, no? However, uh, uh, critical points can also be found at the point of non-differentiability. So, pag sinabi natin point of non-differentiability, it is the point on where you cannot draw a tangent line. No? Why? Because at this point, hindi mo naman masasabi na ganyan yung slope mo eh. Hindi mo naman masasabi na ganyan yung slope mo. Because this is a sharp curve. Okay? So, these points are also called a point of non-differentiability because you cannot draw a tangent line there. If you cannot draw exactly what tangent line are you going to draw, therefore, you cannot have a derivative. That's why it is non-differentiable. No? However, in this point, we can see that these points are basically differentiable yung point na yan. Pero, their derivative is 0 because it is a horizontal tangent line. Okay? So, sabi nila, yung critical points daw matatagpuan sa points na kung saan meron tayong horizontal tangent line at point of non-differentiability. But, to further emphasize point of non-differentiability, ano-ano ba yung itsura ng function na pwede tayong makatagpo ng point of non-differentiability? So, that what we call the three types. No? Merong corner on which we cannot, on which the function is non-differentiable on this point, no? And we have this point on which the function is not differentiable at point A, and this point on which the function is not differentiable at point E. So in this function, makikita natin the definition of extreme value theorem tells us na dapat continuous si function, no? Para siya ay maging differentiable. However, the difference is it has a gap. So therefore, we cannot draw a tangent line here on whatever. No? However, in this one, we can see that this vertical tangent is not basically a tangent. It's not basically a derivative because remember that the slope of vertical line is always undefined. Okay, hindi natin malalaman kung gaano ba katayog si function na yan. Okay, unlike on the slope, na kapag horizontal si slope mo, meaning to say, if you have a horizontal slope, therefore you have a if you have a horizontal slope, therefore, you have a 0. So, your function is equal to, your derivative is equal to 0. Diba? Pag meron tayong horizontal, meron tayong vertical. So, we've already discussed that naman, no? So, critical points. So, for example, we have point F, no? So, we already discussed that. Ano bang tawag dun sa points na kung saan meron siyang horizontal tangent line and yung derivative niya is 0. So, that point is what we call the stationary point. So, stationary point is the type of critical point where the derivative of f of x is equal to 0. So, to sum up, the critical points can be found graphically or mathematically in the points where there is a horizontal tangent line, which is also called the stationary point, and the point of non-differentiability. So, yun yung dun natin matatagpuan yung mga critical points. Sa stationary point at sa point of non-differentiability. Okay? So, we've already discussed that. So, what is first derivative test? Okay, the first derivative test actually would tell us if some interval is increasing or decreasing. So, we need to classify our critical points if it has a relative minimum or a relative maximum. No? So, what is the steps in finding a derivative test? So, in finding a derivative test, we need first to identify the critical points. No? Another step is the testing the points, whether it is maximum or minimum. So, in finding critical points, ang palaging tatandaan is we need to differentiate the function. We need to find the first derivative of the function and equate that to 0. Okay? So, basically, we need to find the x values of that function because points has a coordinates, di ba? So, para mahanap natin si x values, kailangan natin i-differentiate muna si function, then equate natin siya sa 0 to find the critical points x's. So, what happens in this critical points? So, these critical points can be used, no, to find naman yung ating y, no, para malaman natin yung coordinate y. So, how are we going to find the coordinate y? We are just going to substitute the x values on the original function para mahanap natin si y. Then, pag meron na tayong points, no, na x and y, i-determine na natin yon kung siya ba ay maximum, minimum, or hindi naman pala siya hindi naman siya relative extrema. Okay? So, in order for us to test whether maximum or minimum, we are going to test the point using the first derivative test. So, when we say first derivative test, we are just going to substitute, no, our critical point, no, yung x coordinate ng critical point, isa-substitute lang natin dun sa function na dinerive natin. Kung kanina, dinerive natin on the sinubstitute natin sa original function, ito naman, isa-substitute natin sa first derivative ng function. Now, it just says that we have a positive sign ng derivative, tapos papunta siya sa negative sign ng derivative. Okay, so this positive to negative sign is actually the minimum, the maximum. Okay, you have to remember this. Pag Pn, that is maximum, and kapag n to p, negative to positive, that is the minimum. So later, meaning to say that interval is decreasing kapag negative, no? Kapag from decreasing siya kapag yung ano natin is negative to positive. Pero maximum siya kapag yung point natin is increasing, no? Pn. Ito yung lagi niyong tatandaan. Pn tsaka np. So, that's the shortcut. Pn, palaging pen, tsaka lagi siya yung maximum. So, later, we are going to find that, no, by using an example. Okay, just like what I have said, we can say that it is the point is local minimum if the function is decreasing. No? Pag meron tayong negative na slope, ibig sabihin decreasing siya. But nung pumunta siya sa letter A, bigla siyang tumaas. No, yung point na to, itong point na to, ang tinatawag nating local minimum. No, pag meron naman tayong function na pataas, tapos at some point, bumaba siya, ito yung tinatawag nating local maximum, yung point na yun, kung saan nagbago yung direction niya from increasing to changing. But if we can see that there is no increase or decrease on both sides, no? Kunyari dito, pataas siya, tapos pagdating niya sa point na to, tumaas pa din siya. Therefore, we have no local maximum or minimum there. But this point is a critical point. Yung sinasabi ko sa inyo, hindi lahat ng critical point ay maximum point. Hindi lahat ng critical point ay matatagpuan sa local extrema. Pero lahat ng local extrema ay matatagpuan sa critical point. Another example is this one. So for example, we have this A, no, this point A na negative. So kung pumunta ako dyan sa A na yan, ang pababa, as pagdating ko sa point na yun, is bumaba pa din, walang nagbago. Therefore, it has in this point A is not a local maximum nor minimum. Okay? So, mangyayari lang yon kapag yung function is gumaganyan, pero pagdating niya sa point na to, bigla siyang bumaba. No, pagdating niya sa point na yan, bigla siyang bumaba. So, therefore, this is the maximum. And baliktad naman, pag pababa yung function, tapos pagdating niya sa point na yan, bigla siyang tumaas, that is the local minimum. Okay? So, for example, we have this function, x cubed minus 3x squared minus 9x plus 20. In order for me to find to analyze this function, we're going to analyze the function based on the based on the first derivative test. So first, we are going to find its critical point. Okay? So yun sa una, in order for us to find the critical points, we need to differentiate that and equate to 0. Then, substitute natin yung value sa original function. Then, after that, pag na-substitute na natin yung values ng x sa original function, makukuha na natin si value ng y. So, how are we going to do that? So, for example, we have x cubed minus 3x squared. Then, if we have this function, fx lang pala yan. Yeah. Fx is equal to x cubed minus 3x squared minus 9x plus 20. So if we get the first derivative of the function, we can have a 3x squared minus 6x minus 9. Okay? Now, sabi, we need to differentiate and equate this function to 0. So, basically, this function, we are going to equate this function to 0. So, if we equate that to 0, we are going to get the x values, no? O, sige, factor pa natin. Factor pa ba? Oh, this is also x squared minus 3, i-divide natin sa 3, magiging x squared minus 2x minus 3 na yan. So, what's the factor is this function? So, the factor is x minus 3, di ba? And x plus 1. So, we have now the x values. So, if we factor out, no, therefore, our value of x is equal to positive 3 and x is equal to negative 1. So, this is our x points, no, or the critical points. Ito yung x values ng ating critical points. Now, siyempre, si points, di ba, siya ay merong x coordinate at y coordinate. So, hahanapin natin si y coordinate. Kasi meron na tayong x 3, tsaka negative 1. Ang tanong, ano yung y coordinate natin dito? Hindi pa natin alam. Kaya, hahanapin natin. Okay? So, in order for us to find the critical point on that, we are just going to substitute the get, di ba? Meron tayong x is equal to 3 and x is equal to negative 1. So, we are going to substitute this x is equal to 3 and x is equal to negative 1 on this function. Okay? Original. So, kung meron tayong f equal to 3, so, tingnan nyo lang kung anong magiging sagot. So, 3 cubed minus 3x squared minus 9, 3 squared minus 9 times 3 plus 20 on your calculator. If you try to calculate that, try nyo kakalculate, minus 3 times 2 times 3 squared minus 9 times 3 plus 20. What's the answer? So, the answer is negative 7. So, since negative 7 ang sagot, going back to our slide, yung ilalagay natin dito is negative 7. Okay? Ito ay negative 7. So, meron na tayong isang critical point. Ito na lang ang hahanapin natin. So, if we substitute f of negative 1 on the function, so let's try. Substitute negative 1 here. Therefore, magkakaroon tayo ng negative 1 cube minus 3 times negative 1 squared minus 9 times negative 1 plus 20. So, what's the answer? Try on your calculator. 3 minus 3 times negative 1 squared minus 9 times negative 1 plus 20. The answer is 25. Okay? So, if the answer is 25, therefore, magkakakuha na tayo ng isang critical point here, no, na 25. Here is 25. So, dalawa na yung critical points natin. Yes, tapos na tayo dito. Find the critical points. But we need to determine, no, on our next question. Tapos na tayo sa letter A. These are the CP or the critical points. Now, we need to determine the intervals, no, where the function is increasing or decreasing. And how are we going to do that? In order for us to determine where the function is increasing or decreasing, we need to draw we need to test the points taken, no? By taking any points at the left of 3 and the left and right of 3 and -1. Then substitute the function that is differentiated. Okay? So, ano bang differentiated function na to? Pag dinifferentiate natin tong function na to, meron tayong f of 3, hindi, f of x, f prime of x, teka lang, burahin ko. Diba, magkakaroon ako ng f prime of x, f prime of x, that is equal to 3x squared minus 6x minus 9. Tama? So, this is the differentiated function. So, if this is the differentiated function, therefore, dito natin isa-substitute si critical points natin. So, before we do that, no, to test the point, we need to draw a number line. Okay? So, remember, yung critical points natin is at 3, -7. So, focus lang tayo kay x-axis. So, meron tayong 3. Then, ano pa yung isa nating critical point? 3 and -1. So, asan yung 3 yan dyan? Dito yung 0. Dito yung -1. So, we need to determine, no, kung increasing ba siya or decreasing. So, in this function, if we substitute any value from the left of -1, so give me a number that is on the left of -1. So, for example, we have -1.1 here. Okay? Then, we are going to test this point, no? Kung increasing ba siya or decreasing. Now, if we substitute -1.1, no? Titingnan natin kasi si -1, kung siya ba ay local maximum or minimum. Para malaman yun, kailangan nating i-test to. Interval na to. So, ibig sabihin, itetest natin si interval from -infinity to -1. Okay? Para matest yan, we need to substitute any value from the left of -1 to the differentiated function. So, if we substitute -1 on this function, pag sinubstitute natin dyan, we would obtain, 3x squared minus 6x minus 9. So, 3 times -1 squared minus 6 times -1 minus 9. What's the answer? What's the resulting answer if you do that? Diba, magkakaroon tayo ng 3 times -1 squared minus 6 times -1 minus 9. Magkakaroon tayo ng 0, diba? 0. -1.1 kasi. Erase. Tinan ko lang kung may shortcut to sa calculus, pero parang mayroon. X cubed minus 3x squared minus 9x plus 20. So, at x is equal to -1. Meron nga siyang shortcut sa calculus. Turo ko sa inyo kung paano, no? So, ito sa shortcut in calculator para hindi na kayo mag-substitute, no? So, get your calculator. Put 911. 991. Ayan. Okay, after getting your calculator, you just input the original function. You click shift, then this sign, ulit, click shift, then this sign. Then, shift, tsaka ito. Ayan. Tapos type mo si function. X cube, yung original function natin. Minus 3 alpha x squared minus 9 alpha x. Ito, parenthesis na yun. Then, plus 20. Pagdating nyo dito sa x dyan, just click, right click dito, right click. Then, x is equal to, ano yung gusto nating i-test? Negative 1.1. So, you see if the resulting value is positive. So, positive yung lumabas. So, tingnan nyo nga kung ganyan din lumabas sa inyo. X cube kung positive yung lumabas sa inyo. So, check if this is also positive. So, the answer is 1.23 positive. So, ilalagay nyo dito, positive. Okay? So, meaning to say pala, na yung, since yung derivative ko dito is positive, yung aking function dito ay increasing. Diba? Ngayon, gusto nating malaman kung pagdating niya sa point na to, bababa ba siya or hindi. So, magte-test pa tayo ng isang point na nasa pagitan ng negative 1 at 0. So, negative 1 at 0. So, give me any point that nasa pagitan ng negative 1 at 0. Ay, hindi. Negative 1 to 3 pala. Kasi diba ito yung isa nating critical point. Gusto na naman nating malaman kung si function ba is magtutuloy-tuloy bang pataas yan or magtutuloy-tuloy ba siyang pataas pero pagdating dito mababa siya. So, gusto nating malaman. So, substitute any values that is between negative 1 and 3. So, example of values of that is negative 0.9. So, kanina nakuha natin si negative 1.1, positive pala yung derivative. Aalamin natin kung dito ba ay negative or positive. So, just use your calculator. Then, palitan nyo lang si x nyo ng 0.9. So, let's see what's the resulting value. So, the resulting value is negative. So, therefore, negative siya dito. This is positive na naging negative. Therefore, this point, guys, this negative 125 is our local, that's the local maxima. Okay, that's the local maxima or minimum. Maximum. Okay? So, basically, na nakuha natin dito is bumaba siya. Negative, 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 negative. So, lahat pala ng naandun ay negative. No? Ngayon, kung since negative na yung nasa kaliwa ng 3, no? Alam natin, na yung ilalagay natin dito, we are going to test naman yung 3. Okay? Palitan nyo to. Yung 3. Test the 3. Okay? So, since nag-substitute na tayo, kunyari ito, 2.9. Sige nga, try nga ulit natin sa calcu. Let's find 2.9. Tingnan nyo kung siya ay positive or negative. 2.9. The answer is negative, diba? So, negative. So, tama ba sa graph natin? Titingnan nyo yung graph natin, tama siya. Okay? Negative yung nasa kanan ng 3. Ngayon, titingnan naman na natin kung yung si 3 ba, no, is pataas siya or dediretso siyang pababa. So, we are going to take a look if this function is pababa or pataas, no? Sariaya, ba't ngayon ka lang dumating? Panoorin mo na lang tong recording, ha? Tanggalin na kita dito. Kasi ang layo, dami ko nang na-discuss. Okay? Panoorin mo na lang tong recording, ha? Or gusto mo sumabay ka na, pwede rin naman. Okay? So, continuing, we are just going to substitute this function, 3.1, dun sa ating function. Okay? So, palitan nyo lang to, 3.1. para malaman nyo kung siya ay positive or negative. So, since siya ay positive, siya ay nag-i-increase. No? So, from negative, naging positive, therefore, this is a local minimum. No? Ibig sabihin pala, yung point na 3 at negative 7 ay local minimum. Okay? Kasi from negative, no, pababa siya eh. Pero nung bumatak siya sa 3, tumaas siya. So, local minimum siya. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, nahanap na natin si local maximum and minimum. Because our local maximum is 3, tsaka negative 3, and what's the coordinate of our local maximum? Negative 7. And our another coordinate, which is the negative 1 and 25, this is our local minimum, itong negative 1 and 25. Okay? So, tapos na natin. Hanap natin si critical point. Nagamit na natin si first derivative test kung siya ba ay local minimum. So, since ito ay pataas naman, therefore, itong point na itong palang 3, no? Ang point na yan ay, yung point na yan ay local minimum. Pero itong point na itong 1 is a local maximum. Okay? So, yun na, nakuha na natin kung yung local maximum. So, on your another example. So, guys, for example, we need to find the location of all local extrema for the function 5x1 to third minus x raised to 5 thirds. So, what are we going to do is to first derive the function. Anong derivative na? To derive that function, we have f prime of x. Tapos, anong nga mangyayari? Mababa si 1 third, di ba? Magiging 5 multiply to 1 third. Diba? Ganyan, di ba? Tapos, x raised to 1 third minus 1. Tama? Minus 5 third. Baba natin si 5 third. Multiply naman natin sa x. Tapos si 5 third, subtract natin ng 1. So, to simplify this derivative, magkakaroon tayo ng 5 over 3. Tapos, si x, anong sagot dito? 1 third minus 1. 1 third minus 1 is equal to 1 third minus 3 over 3. So, therefore, the answer is negative 2 third. So, therefore, our x is negative 2 third. So, para mababa, since ibababa natin si x negative 2 third, sa denominator, magiging x raised to 2 over 3 siya. Minus 5 third minus 1. What is 5 third minus 1? So, in your calculator, just type that. You will get an answer of, ano sagot? 5 third minus 1. Minus 3 over 3. This is 2 third naman, no? So, positive 2 third. So, we'll retain. So, 5 third, 5 over 3, x 2 third. Okay? So, continuing, we have a 5 third here. Tapos, meron tayong 5 third dito. So, anong gagawin natin? We're just going to subtract both sides, no? This 5 third and this 5 third. So, we're going to have this common multiple, which is 3x raised to 2 third. Then, 3x raised to 2 third divided by 3x raised to 2 third, magkakaroon tayo ng 1. So, multiply natin, magiging 5 minus 3x raised to 2 third divided by 3. Ang sagot. That's x raised to 2 third. However, we are just going to multiply that with this 5x 2 third. Magiging sagot ay 5x 4 third. So, bakit naging 4 third? Kasi, di ba, 3x 2 third divided by 3, the answer is x 2 third. mumultiply natin sa 5x 2/3. Paano ba tayo mag-multiply ng exponents? We are just adding. So, 2/3 plus 2/3, we will have 5x raised to 4/3. So, ganito. Okay? So, let's derive. Let's continue simplifying this equation. Magkakaroon tayo, we can factor out 5 here. So, if we factor out 5, we will have 1 minus x raised to 4/3 over 3x raised to 2/3. So, pinactor out ko lang si 5 dito. Okay? So, ito yung pinakang function natin na dinerive natin. Okay? Naintindihan? Now, since meron na tayo na function na na-derive na, which is that one, no? So, in order for us to derive that one, anong gagawin natin? I-equate natin ngayon si function saan? Sa 0. Okay? So, we are just going to equate. Check mo nga kung tama itong derivative. Parang tama naman, no, Mr. Yaya? Binaba ko si 1/3. Multiply ko sa 5 minus 5/3. 5/3 minus 2/3 to. Factor out ko si 5. Diba? So, tama naman, no? So, we are now going to identify, no, the location of all local extrema and minima. So, using this critical point, using this function, we are going to find the critical points. Okay? So, remember that the first derivative of the function will be equated to 0. Okay, ano ba yung function natin? Ang function natin is 5 multiply sa 1 minus x raised to 4/3 over 3x raised to 2/3. So, equate natin siya sa 0. So, this is equal to 0. Then, to find the x values, what are we going to do? Multiply this. You just multiply both sides by 1/3 x raised to 2/3. So, magkakaroon tayo ng 5. 1 minus x raised to 4/3 be equal to 0 pa din. Kasi pag 3x 2/3 multiply to 0, just 0. So, we need to find the value of x. No? If we divide both sides by 5, ano matitira na lang? Ayan na lang, ano? This is also 0. So, matitira na lang sa atin is si 1 minus x raised to 4/3 is equal to 0. So, what are we going to do? Is since yung value ng isang x na, meron na tayong isang value ng x which is 0, so hanapin pa natin isang value ng x. So, if we substitute here to the right, we'll have, substitute transpose pala, x raised to 4/3. Di ba, any number, any x number raised to x raised to number, no, ang sagot lang naman ay 1 is 1 pa din. Di ba? Any number raised to itself, or kahit ilang beses mo pa yung erase, or kahit anong number pa mo siya erase, nang sagot ay 1 din. Okay, that's why x is equal to 1. So, meron na tayong critical points. X is equal 0. So, these are the critical points. Okay? So, may critical points na tayo. So, ano ang gagawin natin dyan? Hahanapin naman natin si original. Hahanapin natin yung coordinates. So, meron na tayong at x equal to 0, tsaka at x is equal to 1. So, hindi natin alam ngayon si coordinates. So, hindi natin alam si y dito at si y dito. Okay? So, what are we going to do? In order for us to find that, we are just going to substitute this function, this x value, on the original function. Okay? So, what's our original function? We will have 5x raised to 1/3 minus x raised to 5/3, di ba? So, we have 5x. Our original function is f. So, if you substitute f0 is equal to our original function na 5x raised to 1/3 minus x raised to 5/3. So, pag sinubstitute natin dyan, si f at 0, magkakaroon tayo ng 5 raised to 0, no, raised to 1/3 minus 0 raised to 5/3. So, what is that in our calculator? 0 raised to 5/3. What's the answer? The answer is always 0. So, 0 pa din, no? Ibig sabihin, meron siyang critical point at point 0. Okay? If we go back to our definition, no, si x raised to 4/3 is the same on raising negative 1 raised to 4/3. The answer is also 1. Okay? That's why our another critical point is negative 1. So, tatlo yung critical point natin. Nahanap na natin yung isa, which is 0, 0. Then, the other one, hindi pa natin alam. Substitute pa natin siya sa original function. So, if we have f of 1 is equal to 5 raised to 1, 1/3 minus 1 raised to 5/3, what's the answer in our calculator? 5 plus 1 raised to 1/3 minus 1 raised to 5/3. The answer is, anong nakukuha niyong sagot? Try on your calculator. If we have 5 times 1 raised to 1/3, tama? Minus 1 raised to 5/3, the answer is 4. Okay? So, the answer here is 4. So, yung isa nating point is 4. So, therefore, we would have 1, 4. So, ito yung isa nating point. Ito yung ating critical points. Okay? So, hanapin pa natin yung isang critical point by substituting this negative 1 to the original function. F negative 1, 5 multiplied sa negative 1 raised to 1/3 minus negative 1 raised to 5/3. That's the answer. 5 negative 1 raised to 1/3 minus negative 1 raised to 5/3. So, the answer is negative 4 naman. So, yung isang point na critical point is 1, negative 4. So, we are going to test all of these points, no, to find the local maxima and minima using the first derivative test. Okay? So, paano natin yan mahahanap? So, we must use the first derivative test to find the location of all local extrema. Okay? So, para natin mahanap yan, i-graph natin ngayon sa ating number line. Ito si 0, 0, 1, 4, at 1, negative 4. So, dito, meron tayong 0. Ano pa yung mga critical points natin na nasa x? Yung 1, di ba? Tsaka negative 1. Yun lang naman yung critical points natin eh. Negative 1, tsaka 1. Ngayon, itetest na natin siya. Itetest na natin ngayon yung ating function. Okay? By drawing this number line. So, itetest natin ay si negative 1 at 4. Diba? Ano yung nakuha natin kanina? Negative 1 at negative 4 pala. So, itetest din natin si 1 at 4. Tama ba? Tama ba yung nakuha ko sa palagi? Tama naman. Ano? Then, si 0, 0, itetest din natin. So, paano natin yan matetest? We are going to determine whether this point is a local maxima or this point is a local maxima or this point is a local maxima or minima. So, titingnan natin kung yung mga points na yun is a local maxima or minima. So, what are we going to do is we need to substitute from the left of negative 1. So, from the left of negative 1, meron tayong negative infinity to positive 1. Negative infinity to negative 1. So, give me any number from the left of negative 1. So, basically, pinakamadali na nasa left ng negative 1 ay 2. Negative 2, di ba? So, itetest natin ngayon kung yung points na ba to is pataas or pababa. So, if we substitute negative 2, ano nga ulit yung ating function na dinerive? Diba yung dinerive nating function ay f of x is equal sa 5 times 1 minus x raised to 4 third over 3x raised to 2 third. So, ngayon, itetesting natin. Kapag si f prime ng negative 1, pag sinubstitute natin dito na 5, 1 minus negative 1 raised to 4 third over 3x negative 1 to 2 third. So, what's the answer? Tingnan natin kung negative or positive siya. Now, pag negative, meaning to say, the function in that interval is decreasing. Pag positive, yung slope na makukuha natin, therefore, yung makukuha natin is, the slope is increasing. So, titingnan natin. So, use your calculator again. So, type the original function, alpha ddx. We have ddx, shift ddx. Then, proceed on the original function. Ano yung original function natin? 5x raised to 1 third. 5 alpha x raised to 1 third. Okay? Minus alpha x raised to 5 thirds. So, we're going to substitute x kung anong value man ng x yan para mahanap natin si critical point. Ano yung x natin? Yan yung test point natin, negative. Ang test point natin ay negative 2. Diba? Hindi pala yan. Not pala negative 2. Negative 2, negative 2. So, ang test point natin ay negative 2. Negative 2, negative 2, negative 2. Bakit negative 2, sir? Kasi nga, ito yung nasa left ng negative 1. Titingnan natin kung siya ba ay increasing or decreasing. Para malaman yun, substitute natin yung test point natin dun sa first derivative. So, substituting negative 2, kasi itong function na to, i-derive niya na yung ating original function. So, pag sinubstitute daw natin, ang sagot ay negative 1.59. So, therefore, the answer here is negative. Okay? So, therefore, itong function na to is negative. Negative. That's why this is a decreasing. So, para malaman natin si 1, kung siya ba ay critical point or not, o ay critical point or not, kung siya ay increasing or decreasing, alamin natin to. From negative 1 to 0. So, give me any value from negative 1 to 0. F of negative 1.1, di ba? Ay, 0.9. Or 0.5. Anong gusto nyo? From negative 1 to 0, 0.5 na lang, no? So, if you substitute the function 5 times 1 times 0.5 raised to 4 third over 3 multiplied to 0.5 raised to 2 third, it's the answer. So, you get your calculator, you just change this negative 2 to negative 0.5 or kahit anong number na naisip nyo na nasa pagitan ng negative 1 at 0. So, the answer here is 1.59. Okay, so that is positive. Ibig sabihin, dito pala ay nag-i-increase siya. Therefore, this point is a local max. Okay, local max yan. Ngayon, hanapin naman natin yung nasa pagitan ng 0 at 1. Okay? Give me any number na nasa pagitan ng 0 at 1. 0.5, di ba? Ito, 0.5. So, substitute lang natin yon. So, F multiply to 0.5. Magkakaroon tayo ng 5 multiply to 1 minus negative to ha. 1 minus 0.5 raised to 4 third over 3 multiplied to 0.5 is 2 third. What's the answer? So go to your calculator. Kanina sagot ay positive. Just change this to positive 0.5. So what's the answer? The answer is positive naman. So ang sagot pala, pag inano natin si 0.5 is positive pa din. Okay? So kung positive pa din yan, therefore, yung 0.0 natin ay hindi siya local extrema. No? Meaning kasi hindi siya local minimum, hindi rin siya local maximum. That's why this point is not a local max, not a local min. Okay? Now, let's test naman yung nasa right ng 1. So, paano natin itetest yung mga nasa right ng 1? Any value that is on the right of 1. So, any value that is on the right of 1 is, for example, 1.1. So, we're going to substitute that on the whole function. So, f 1.1 equals 5. So, you test this on your calculator by changing this to 1.1. Okay? So, what's the answer? What's the answer? Negative. So, ibig sabihin, nung na-reach ng function, no, yung function, habang dumadaan yung function from here to here, umingkris siya. Pero pagdating sa 0, umingkris pa rin siya. Pero pagdating dito sa 1, bumaba siya. Okay? So, therefore, this function is negative, negative, negative. So, this is negative pala to in positive. That's why this is local minimum pala yan. Ito naman, positive to negative. This is local maximum. Okay, local max yan. Kasi PN eh. Yun ang palatandaan ko sa local maximum, PN. Dito naman, NP. Okay? So, sir, daming nangyari, no? So, pero ano lang naman yan? Ano lang sinasabi niya? Sinasabi lang niya na meron tayong points, no? Ano ba yung critical points natin? So, yung mga critical points na nakuha natin, which is 0, 0, ano yung sabi sa ating number line? You can see, hindi siya pares positive. So, same sign. So, therefore, hindi siya hindi siya local, not local, max, or min. Okay? However, yung 1, 4, tingnan niyo maigi, yung positive 1, 4. Ano yung positive 1, 4 dyan? Ito, diba? So, siya ay local max kasi nag-change siya from positive to negative. So, si 1, 4 ay local max. So, si negative 1 at negative 4 naman, siya ay local mean based sa ating number line. Yan. Kasi negative to positive, local mean yan. Local. So, ganyan. Okay? Now, makikita nyo yung graph niya, no, na si negative 1, 4, this is the local minimum. Right? And this 0 here, this is a point where there is no local extrema. Kasi yung point niyan, di ba, critical point yan kasi meron siyang horizontal tangent line. Ito, point na to, meron din siyang horizontal tangent line. Ngayon, yung mga point na yan, this is the local maximum. This point is the local minimum, while this point is the local maximum. Okay? So, ayan. Ito yung mga critical points na. So assignment, you need to find the critical point of this one. Determine the intervals where the function is increasing or decreasing. Yung ginawa natin kanina, yung draw na number. Then find the local maxima. So in our next topic, we are going to discuss the second derivative test of the concavity and points of inflection. So I'm going to end the recording now.